Hey, what's up everybody? BNG here. In this video, I'm going to go over the weapon system that's included with VRIF. We're going to swap in a new weapon model, and then we'll take a look at the weapon script to see how we can modify it to change its behavior. After watching this video, you should hopefully have a good idea of how to make your own weapons and modify it to suit your own gameplay requirements. Alright, so to get started, I'm using a weapon model that I found here on the Unity Asset Store. It's free, it has a nice quality to it, and the meshes have been separated for pieces like the trigger and the charging mechanism, so that way we can use those to make it more interactive and interesting in VR. It also includes a magazine and a bullet model that we can use for ammo and inserting the clip into the actual weapon, which I think will be cool. Now I will say if you are using this particular model, it does say that it's HDRP only, but with a little bit of tweaking you can get it to work for the standard pipeline. You just need to create a new material that uses the standard shader and then just manually assign the textures. Don't use any of the HDRP stuff, just make a new shader, put the normal map and the albedo texture in there, and you should be good to go. It looks nice in standard. So now that we have a model, I like to start with an existing prefab that I think will fit nicely. Obviously, I think this rifle should work great, looks pretty close. And that way we can just move the colliders around, make some changes, and we can save it as our own prefab. We don't have to sit there and create each piece, by scratch, which can be time consuming. I've already done the work for you, so just modify it, and that will make your life much easier. So I'd like to start by putting the model in this graphics component, which is marked by GFX here. And that is, if you see GFX in VRIF, that usually stands for graphics, meaning just the model representation. There shouldn't be any colliders or anything like that. So if you just disable this existing model and put ours in there, and we can kind of line it up close to the trigger, which I think is a good spot, as it's pretty precise reference point. So we'll line this up and then we can disable it and give it a test. So I also like to set the weapon to infinite ammo so that we don't have to reload, and then set this must chamber rounds to false. And that way we don't have to pull the trigger back, we don't have to mess with pulling the charging mechanism back while we're testing. We can just pull the trigger, see what it looks like. So the model looks great, we just need to start making some adjustments. I like to start with the physics colliders, and then we can just work our way down the hierarchy and change things as we go. So to change the colliders, you can click this Edit Collider button here and then just manually adjust them in the scene view, which is really helpful. And feel free to use like capsule colliders here for the barrel or whatever shapes you think will work well. A couple of notes here is to make sure you leave an opening for the magazine to fit into, because it's going to slide up into the body of the rifle. And these don't need to be perfect. I usually just start by roughing it out, getting them pretty close to the barrel and the stock and things like that. And then you can come back later and make small adjustments as you play test and see how things feel. So this collider here is the one that's used to determine where to grab with two hands, so you want to be a little extra conscientious of where this is placed. Alright, so next we'll move the muzzle point object here to the tip of the barrel. This is where the raycast is going to come out if you're using a raycast type weapon, or if you're using a projectile, the projectile will be spawned at this point. So if you are using projectiles, you just want to make sure it's got enough clearance for whatever object you're spawning so it doesn't jam up against your collider of the barrel. And then next we can move the muzzle flash object pretty much to the same place. If you activate it like this, you can see that the muzzle flash has a light attached to it, and you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like and move it around, and then I just keep it deactivated. So next up we have the eject point. This is the transform that's going to be used to determine where to eject bolts from, or casings, when firing or when you're using the charging mechanism. I like to give it a little bit of an angle upwards here so that it kind of ejects up and at a nice trajectory. So next we have the clip insert object. This is what's used to stick the clip into the gun and keep it in place. These are a couple of trigger colliders. This main one determines when it snaps in, when you collide with it, what is considered a valid snap area. And this other is the grab area, and this trigger is just used to, when the clip is inside the weapon, where's a valid spot to be able to pull it out. Also right here, there's an acceptable magazine name property. So that means that when a clip does hit this trigger area, that the transform name has to have this in it. Essentially, the idea is to not be able to stick a pistol clip inside of a rifle and vice versa. So that's what this value is for. So I'm just going to make this area a little bit smaller so it snaps in pretty quickly. If you do it longer, then you can kind of align the clip into the body, which is nice, but since this is sort of shallow, I want to keep it nice and snappy. Alright, so next we have the slide or charging mechanism, and this is the mechanism that slides backwards when you're shooting or if you're manually pulling it back to charge the weapon. So we have a box collider here that's grabbable. That gives us a place to hold on to pull it back. And that uses a configurable joint to keep everything in place and give it a little bit of resistance. So if you want to tweak that, then the configurable joint is the place to do it. This also allows us to charge the weapon using physics by pressing it against a wall or another weapon, for example. So let's go ahead and just parent our charging mechanism under the slide here, and then we'll hide the existing one. And we can reposition a grabbable collider area to where our new model is. So if you take a look at the weapon slide script, you'll see two settings for min local Z and max local Z. And what that's referring to is the transform's local position when resting or pulled all the way back. So for this weapon, for example, we have negative 0.1 and 0, which looks kind of like this. And if we just move this transform back and forth, we can see what those values are to plug into that script. So we could pull this back here, copy this value over into our component. You may need to adjust the configurable joint as well. I'm just going to keep the defaults here for now. So while we're looking at this, we can see there's a bullet in here called chambered rifle shell. And this is a game object that's shown or it's hidden depending on if there's a bullet currently in the chamber. So if we look through our model, we can pull our new piece in here and we'll hide the old one. And then we can just position this in a good spot here. And now as we move the charging piece back and forth, we can see the bullet moving along with it, which I think is pretty cool looking. All right, so we're almost ready to test our changes. Next we have this clip release object, but that's actually just a mesh. So we can go ahead and disable that or just remove it entirely. And we can move this red dot laser up a bit as well. I like to keep it there while I'm testing. It just helps dial in aiming from the muzzle. And I think the ring helper looks fine here, but you can manually adjust it to wherever you'd like it to be. So I think that all looks great. Let's just see how that feels now. All right, so everything there looks good to me. I did notice that the trigger wasn't working or wasn't moving, so we can take a look at that now. If you look at the weapon script, there's a spot here to define that trigger transform. And so this transform is animated depending on how far you're pulling down the trigger. So once we assign this transform, it should just work. It's going to use the default rotation and pull it back. And one thing worth noting is that if your model does have an animator component on it, just go ahead and disable it because otherwise the animator might be trying to override the animation. So if you have that assigned and it's not working for some reason, just disable your animator. That should be fine. All right, great. So it's working well, but we're still on infinite ammo. So let's switch back to manual ammo. And then we'll also set up a clip that we can use. So let's hide the clip on the weapon model, and then we'll add those graphics to our existing clip prefab here. Now we can just adjust the colliders like we did for the rifle. And if we need more kind of angles here, we can just make a child object, rotate that, and then adjust the colliders from there. All right, so next we can add our bullet model to replace the existing one that's there. So the way that ammo works for these manual clip types is that each object that has a bullet component on it counts as ammo. So if you want to add more ammo, you just duplicate these objects, which you can do with Control D to do it quickly. And as bullets are fired, these game objects are deactivated. So that means if you have a mesh render on here, if you have your graphics objects and you're firing, that's going to get deactivated as the ammo is spent up through the clip. So that can be a really cool effect, especially if you can see through the clip, which we cannot on this model. So I'm just only going to enable the mesh on the first bullet. Otherwise, it's just kind of wasted. But if you were creating something like a grenade launcher, rocket launcher, something where the ammo is visible, then you can add your meshes there, and I think that's a really nice effect to use in VR. All right, so let's give that a try in play mode, and we'll have a look and see how the ammo is being spent. All right, so I noticed that the shells that we're ejecting were the old ones. the old prefabs. So now's a good time to take a look at the weapon script and go through some of the different settings that we can change to make this, customize it, make it a little bit different. So the first one we want to look at is probably the chambered bullet. I'm sorry, the bullet casing prefab. The bullet casing prefab is what's going to be used to eject. So we want to find, we can really just use, let's see, we'll just create our own prefab. So again, we'll start with an existing prefab, and we can modify it. We'll just add in our graphics, and then save it as our own prefab. So we've got our spent shell here. Can align it with our existing one. Let's see. And we'll rotate it. If you hold Control, then you can snap to degrees, which is helpful. That already looks pretty close. We can make the capsule collider a little bit larger. Let's see, it's going to be the height. Let's do 0.04. Looks good. I'm just going to save this in the root directory since this is just an example, but here's our prefab, and then back on our weapon. Set the bullet casing to the prefab that we just made. Alright, so take a look at some of these properties that we have. I think max range and damage are pretty self-explanatory. Firing method can be semi-automatic or automatic, whether you hold down the trigger or not. The different reload methods that we have are infinite ammo, which we looked at earlier. Manual clip, meaning we need to have a clip attached to the weapon in order to fire it. So, and this can be as many clips as you want. If there's a clip that's parented to the weapon, when it goes to, find bullets, as long as those components are attached inside the clip, you can have as many clips attached to the weapon as you want, as long as they have bullets. So you could have clips coming out the side, and it doesn't need to just be one standard clip attachment. So internal ammo then means that instead of checking for clips, checking for components inside of clips that are attached to the weapon, that the ammo is just stored as an integer manually. And this is going to be a little bit more efficient, and you can also use this if you're going to write your own ammo functionality. So basically every time you fire, ammo is decremented from a system. So if you want to create your own system, maybe you want to create a charging mechanism or like a cooldown period type thing, you set it to internal ammo, and then in your script you can just manually increase and decrease. It's pretty simple, so it's very, very flexible. The shotgun is another example that uses internal ammo in the sense that when your shell hits a trigger collider on the shotgun, it just simply increases the internal ammo, and it has a max internal ammo as well. So firing rate is, it's just a number you're going to want to tweak it for automatic weapons. It's based on time.time in Unity, and which inside of Unity is based on seconds. So that's generally how this is calculated. Bullet impact force is going to be force added to a rigid body, which is useful mostly for raycasts, so you can kind of simulate a physics force added to a character or an object or whatever. It's the internal ammo we talked about, kind of like for the shotgun, how much is currently in there, which you'll increase or decrease. It's up to you. Automatically, it's, or by default, it's 0, and the max is 32. But, if you're doing a shotgun or something like that, you can lower that to whatever your internal ammo requirements are. And you can be a floating point. It doesn't have to be an integer necessarily. So if you wanted to do like a flamethrower that had a really high amount, you could decrease that as a float. Now, auto chamber and must chamber rounds. Auto chamber means that when you fire the weapon, it's going to automatically, chamber new rounds. But most similarly, you would see that in an automatic weapon. If you set that to false, you have to manually pull that charging mechanism back. So if you're doing like a shotgun or a bolt action rifle, then you'd want to have to manually chamber those rounds in every time. And must chamber rounds means, do you have to do that initial chamber? Do you need to put that bullet in when you first get it, or is it automatically in there? Always fire projectile is basically an override for raycast, because this is called a raycast weapon. But if you just want to always shoot a projectile no matter what, then you just check this on, and now you essentially have a projectile weapon. Fire projectile in slow-mo. You saw me shooting in slow-mo earlier. If this is checked on, then it will shoot the projectile that's defined in here during slow-mo. Otherwise, you can keep it to a raycast, and that way you can shoot raycast in slow-mo as well. There's configurable rates of fire for slow motion, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. Shot force is the shot force for the projectile, or shooting the projectile out. And depending on, as long as your prefab has a rigid body, this is a force that's going to be applied to it. It doesn't even have to be a bullet. In the XR demo, I'm actually shooting out like little rag dolls in one of the guns. Recoil is how much force to apply to the barrel. It's something you kind of have to tweak. And it also depends if you're using, say, velocity for grab physics versus a physics joint. They're going to give you kind of different reactions when you add force to the barrel. So that can, you usually want to push it back a little bit and maybe up. Start with really small values and kind of work your way around. Now, recoil duration, what that does is it loosens the spring for a set amount of time. So if you were adding force to the weapon and you have a really tight spring that's keeping it attached to your hand, it's not going to give you much recoil. So you want to kind of loosen that spring when applying recoil. Raycast layers should be pretty self-explanatory. These are the layers that the raycasts are going to hit when trying to apply damage to things. So if you have a custom AI system, you're going to want to make sure that you're hitting the right layers. Oftentimes, if you're using hitboxes on enemies, you want to ignore the large player capsule they may be using, and then not ignore the hitbox layer. And these transforms are the transforms that have already been set up for you. Most of them should be optional, like the trigger transform. But you can define these to give you sort of that extra functionality. And then we have, let's see, slide configuration. This is how far the slide can be pulled back when it's fired. So right now, if you're holding the button, you can see how much distance is added to the slide on each shot. So you can tweak this a little bit if you want to pull it back more. Should the slide be forced back in the last shot, meaning if it's the last bullet in the magazine, should the slide be forced back? Typically, you probably want this to be true. Then we have inputs below for how do we eject or release a slide or reload. And these are debug information just to help you show if there's a bullet in the chamber or if it's an empty bullet. And then finally, we have events, which should be really useful if you are integrating with a custom AI system. So on shoot, you might do your own raycast or call an event on your weapon to play an animation and things like that. On attached ammo, you can use that to check for your own ammo systems. It just makes it so that you really don't have to rely on this script. You can use the events to create your own custom functionality. And I do encourage you to read through the raycast weapon script. It's not that long, should be pretty well commented, and undealt damage event, you could use that to custom add damage to your custom health system. On raycast hit event is also another important one because that gives you the actual raycast hit, which should be all the information you really need to apply damage to your custom, player or destructible object, etc. All right, and that's it. I think we've covered pretty much everything. So you should have enough information here to create really any type of weapon. We kind of went with a simple rifle, but if you look through the XR demo, there's pistols and a shotgun, and there's pistols that are, some of them are silenced, and some of them have infinite ammo, some shoot different kinds of projectiles. So check all this out, see what the settings are. Some of them have like really high recoil you can check out and see how that was configured. There's a lot of stuff here to just kind of experiment with, and I encourage you to kind of poke around and see how everything works, adjust it to your needs, and have fun with it. Well, thanks for watching. I think I'm obligated to say please like and subscribe if you found this helpful. I'll continue to make more videos like this if this was helpful to you. So please leave a comment below as well if there's anything else that you want to see. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.